Welcome back. This week, Washington came to the Tampa area, and what a show it was. Thousands rallied at the Florida Fairgrounds as President Trump did something highly unusual. He took sides in the Republican primary for Florida governor, throwing his support behind Congressman Ron DeSantis in his race against Agricultural Commissioner Adam Putnam, who had long been seen as the odds-on favorite to win the GOP nomination. The rally also made national news because of the heated confrontation between CNN's White House correspondent Jim Acosta and other reporters. Joining us for more are Mary Ellen Kirkwood of the Sarasota Republican Party, Susan Nylon of the Nylon Report, and joining us by Skype from Tampa is Dan Maduri of News Talk Florida. Now, of course, Trump coming to town, interjecting himself into the primary with the Republicans by endorsing Ron DeSantis. It's a bit unusual for a president to do in a primary. Now, Dan, I know you are on our Skype right now, and you were in Tampa. How are people reacting from that rally?
Well, I was actually at the rally covering it. They absolutely loved it. I heard multiple people walk around saying quite simply, quite clearly, they do not know and have never heard of Ron DeSantis prior, but now they've got the full support of them because of the backing of President Trump. Okay,
thank you, Dan. Now, Mary Ellen, because of that endorsement from the president for Ron DeSantis, does that put him ahead of Adam Putnam now? Do you think more people are going to go and vote at the primary for Ron DeSantis because of this endorsement?
I think there is a lot of excitement right now, whether by August 28th people will have time to consider their choices, because Adam Putnam is well known within the state of Florida in all neighborhoods and in all cities because of the job that he's done as agricultural commissioner. So he has the seasoned executive experience that a good governor requires. So I think there is a lot of enthusiasm, and the polls are certainly right now in Ron DeSantis' favor. But I don't think you can really tell until the day people walk into the polling booth.
Certainly. And of course, when we were having our own ABC7 crew out there at the rally, a lot of people saying they didn't know who Ron DeSantis was before this, but because of the president's endorsement, they feel that they would vote for him. Do you agree with that?
I do think a lot of people will vote based on President Trump's endorsement. And then there will be a lot of Republicans that will take other factors into consideration. But one thing's for sure, after August 28th, whoever our Republican candidate is, every Republican will be behind him 100%.
Okay, thank you, Mary Ellen. Now, Susan, how does DeSantis stack up against Gwen Graham, who appears to be the front runner in the Democratic race? I know the Democratic debate was last night as well, and you were there and watching it. How does DeSantis stack up to Graham?
Well, you know, they're definitely more polar opposite. I think it would have been a little bit more. This is only based on, of recent news. Where I don't know who they're going to be the front runner is in the primary. But if it is Graham and DeSantis that come out, you can't get more polar opposite, more black and white between the two candidates. So it will be a clear divide. There won't be. I think Adam Putnam was probably someone a little bit more in the middle and put Gwen Graham a little bit more in the middle. But DeSantis will be able to, step out and also make her do the same. So it'll be, if that's the way it is, it'll be a really interesting pair up.
All right, thank you so much, Susan. Well, our conversation on This Week in Washington continues.
Fake news, fake news. They are fake. Now, I mean, do you believe, look at this, every night it's the same thing. Wouldn't you think they get tired of these speeches? Wouldn't you think? And here's one thing I'll tell you. If they don't get ratings, those speeches don't go on, doesn't matter. Look how many they have back there. They just can't get enough.
Well, welcome back. As you heard right there, President Trump attacking the media while holding a rally in Tampa earlier this week. Here to talk about all that and much more is Mary Ellen Kirkwood of the Sarasota Republican Party, Susan Nylon of the Nylon Report, and joining us by Skype from Tampa is Dan Maduri of News Talk Florida. Now, Dan, I want to start with you. Over the last week, we've kind of seen President Trump escalating in Tampa and in Pennsylvania yesterday, calling the media the enemy and kind of pinning his supporters against the media. The president even himself retweeted tweeting this, and some say he could be encouraging this type of behavior from what we've seen with CNN's Jim Acosta and some of the supporters for Trump. What do you think is going to happen from all of this?
I think the relationship between the media and the public are going to become more contentious. I think that you see within the Republican Party, there are people that they don't want to believe the facts. We saw numerous shirts of people walking around wearing "We Are Q" t-shirts. Now, this is a conspiracy theorist on 4chan that basically is putting nonsense out there that have been completely debunked by people inside the media and organizations, institutions of fact checkers. But yet people are embodying that person. They're going out there and they're saying we'd rather believe a conspiracy theorist than the facts, than the mainstream media. We think the mainstream media has been so weaponized and so dangerous that we'd rather believe this clown on 4chan than, say, a Jim Acosta who has had an adversarial, contentious relationship with President Donald Trump.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Now, Mary Ellen, has it come to a point where anything Trump supporters see on maybe a major network, or whether it be something that is a controversial website, has it come to the point where they're just going to go blow it off and call it fake news regardless?
No, I watch Morning Joe every morning, New Day, CNN, but I think the problem is that the news stations really are not focusing on presenting news. I can't tell you the number of times I've seen Michael Avenatti on the news about Stormy Daniels, where there's no coverage of the fact, that our unemployment is down to 3.9%, or the jobs that have been created by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, or that coal industry is coming back, steel industry is coming back. There are some tariff concerns, but I think we're all prepared for some short-term pain for long-term gains of free and fair trade. I really believe the media has done it to itself. They have sensationalized and personalized their coverage of Donald Trump. So I and many of the public will review all of the information, but I'll be honest with you. I'll go online, I'll look at the Guardian newspaper from UK, I'll look at the Italian newspaper, French and German, and then I'll make up my own mind, because I feel that the news stations are negative, personal, and really quite vindictive. Like this morning on Morning Joe, Mika Brzezinski was saying, shame on Ivanka Trump because she's not concerned about the illegal foreign national minor children, 500 to 700, that are not united with their parents.
Okay, well,
we have over 553,000 homeless people in this country. It's time that we take care of our own U.S. citizen family and not have this fixation with foreign nationals that we never invited to come here.
So obviously we are just getting started here. So when we come back, we'll discuss how someone in the Trump administration doesn't see the media as the enemy of the people. Stick around. We're just getting started. Welcome back. We just heard from Mary Ellen talking about Trump supporters and major networks, but now we're also going to reach out to Susan Nylon. Now, Susan, we saw how supporters were treating CNN's Jim Acosta. If you haven't seen it by now, you probably live under a rock, to be quite frank. We also had some of our own reporters here at ABC7 who had supporters and people at the rally shouting profanity and just kind of being a really hostile environment. It doesn't matter if you're CNN, ABC, a local station, media in general. You're right. Is this the new normal? I mean, how is this okay and acceptable from somebody in his position to endorse this kind of activity?
It's only the new normal at a Trump rally or at a Trump press conference. As Mary Ellen was saying, that when the media covers other parts of the news, they don't get that treatment for the most part. So I think it's that crowdthink that they get, and they're suffering for it. I want to go back a little bit, though, to what was said, because every show that you mentioned was actually not a news show. It was a news talk show. And I think the majority of the public don't differentiate the difference. And because media is so much about talk and opinions, that people automatically assume that's news, and it's really not. And I think media is responsible for everything, it's that type of programming and making the opinion of news so important.
Okay. And either of you can really weigh in on this. Can people no longer sit down and have a civil conversation when it comes to politics?
I would say they absolutely can, and the majority of us do. The majority of us have civil conversation and discourse. There isn't a single guest that I've ever been on in this show that I don't have civil discourse on. So it is possible, but I think that if they're playing to the camera or they're allowing themselves to find that boogeyman and there's no restraint and there's no accountability, then they don't have to be.
Okay, and now I want to listen in on a soundbite from Ivanka Trump and what she had to say about media being the enemy of the people.
I've certainly received my fair share of reporting on me personally that I know not to be fully accurate. But no, I do not feel that the media is the enemy of the people.
Okay, so of course that was Ivanka Trump, President Donald Trump's daughter. He then tweeted after that saying, quote, "They asked my daughter Ivanka whether or not the media is the enemy of the people. She correctly said no. It is the fake news, which is a large percentage of the media, that is the enemy of the people." So, Mary Ellen, I want to ask you, which is it? Who's right here? I mean, is the media really the enemy of the people when it comes down to it?
Well, I think the point that Susan made, that there's a difference between opinion news and factual news, but I think the problem is, in the United States market, there is no longer a differentiation between facts and opinion.
Correct.
And I think that our news organizations have confused the facts
They're
with
playing
opinion.
to the audience.
And they're no longer giving you the information. For example, if I really want to know the facts, I will go online and I'll look up the exact bill, you know, at thomas.gov. I'll look up articles from many different sources, because the truth is you cannot trust the United States news to be accurate. It's filled with opinion and it's personalized.
Well,
it's no longer, I
Okay,
have a
well,
brother who's a journalist and editor. It's different
And you
nowadays.
think your brother, you would say that your brother is dishonest and not
No.
based
Well,
on
I'd like
factual
to get
information?
Dan's view. He
No.
is, of course,
So-
a member of the media and journalist, as well as Susan. I know you've been a former member of the media. But Dan, I'm sure you've been attacked, as many journalists have been these days. No matter what you say, whether it's pro-Trump or anti-Trump, how has your interaction changed with viewers? And do you agree that all news sources are, as Mary Ellen just said, opinionated versus factual?
No, in fact, I think that the media's job is to provide content that people are consuming. It's up to the consumer to educate themselves on it. And if they want to sit there and just read echo chamber type material that they so often do, I mean, they create channels for themselves, they create Twitter handles for themselves, and they sit there and they set up just themselves with their like-minded friends and their like-minded silos, and they just are afraid and terrified of being challenged on anything. That the moment that they are challenged on something, they find themselves in a position where it's just fake news, but it's inaccurate. It's up to the listener, the viewer, the reader to make sure that they are in fact educating themselves by a viable source. Now, newspapers, television, radio, whatever you want to call it, however you want to label media, social media, apparently a big part of that too, they have a right to print what they want to print, to wade into opinion, to be a part of the community, to be a part of the conversation, to be a part of the country. It's up to the user to make sure that they understand the difference. It's not up to the media and how we label the media and define the media to be confined as they once were back in the 1940s and 50s.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Now, Susan, you, of course, have worked in media as well. Today, I have an article here from a Fox News editor who claims we should stop sending reporters to these Trump rallies, essentially saying their presence allows Trump to use them as a prop. What are your thoughts on this, and do you think it's a matter of time before someone gets hurt?
I would agree with that sentiment, actually. I mean, they're not welcomed. What he presents, he's using them as a prop, and it would make a hell of a statement for the media just to boycott him, even if it is for a little bit. It's almost like feeding frenzy of a shark. And somewhere it's got to stop, and somewhere they have to say enough. And besides, they report more on his Twitter feed than they do anything else. So it's time to say we're not going to tolerate this anymore.
Do you have something you want to add,
I
Mariella?
think that the media has made themselves the story, and if anybody is a prop, the media is the prop. And to be honest, they won't be missed because people can use the internet to find the information, and I think that you underestimate the intelligence and the common sense of the American public to review a wide variety of information
But that would be
and
media.
the ability to make up their mind.
But that would be media, that they have. You can't go on the internet and not read
You
something
can read
that's
the
provided.
Washington
But
Post
that's
on the
media.
internet, the New York Times.
But that's media.
You can compare it to the LA Times, to the
Yeah,
Chicago
and you're
Sun, the
I think
Baltimore
it's really
Sun.
smart, and I would agree with you.
And
I do
that's
the
what
same.
people are doing.
But
we're not relying,
Well, when we-
particularly
we
on
want to recognize
television.
that all of that is media.
When we sit here and talk a little bit about the media, when the president formally uninvites media to events like
Picks on
the
people
CNN's White House
individually.
correspondent Caitlin Collins, he uninvited the press secretary,
Well, she
uninvited
yelled
him.
out. I mean,
well,
she
some
was
would say
really-
she yelled out. Others
she
would
was
say she
very
was asking a
childish and out
question
of
that would just be
control.
regular,
Yeah.
a normal question that
No,
any
she
reporter
yelled
would
We
ask.
like
can't
a
talk about
child.
being childish and out
But
of control without
regardless,
looking at the president.
regardless
either.
of whether she was out of control or not, the fact that you are uninviting media from a public press conference.
Well, he made a spot for another person from the same network. But I do think there is proper behavior and there are good manners. And I think that what I've seen, at least on the television media, is an absence of both and even common sense.
From our president as well.
Well-
His behavior is what has set this course
He's
for
not
everything
beaming
else.
into our houses 24/7.
No, but he's praying
as
that somebody is beaming him
CNN,
in there.
Fox News,
let's,
and MSNBC.
And let alone we forget that he watches the media every single day.
I don't think he's got
Let's
time for that.
let's head over to Dan again now. Dan, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, I'm not sure if you've ever personally been uninvited or personally been attacked from somebody regarding the White House, but is this something? How would that make you feel if you were to be uninvited? Do you feel like that's an infringement on your journalistic right to be able to speak about something like that and the freedom of press?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think freedom of press states that they should be absolutely present in that. And going back to the rallies, I don't think that the press should, in fact, not attend these rallies. They should absolutely be there. If they didn't, Trump could sit there and applaud himself and say, we've beaten them back. They're a bunch of cowards. They don't want to be here. We've used fear as a tactic. So for them not to be present at the rallies would be completely a non-starter, first and foremost. Secondly, I think that you look at the press now and how they're and how it's encapsulated with this president. The presidents have always had a contentious relationship with presidents historically. And this one, of course, has ramped it up a little bit. But if the press does not attend these rallies, does not go to the Rose Garden, does not sit there and ask questions of the press secretary, he has created an ability to have people just follow him on Facebook or Twitter. And now he's got a monopoly on his audience, a monopoly on his base. And that's a disservice to the American public and the American people. And ultimately something I think that he would like to gravitate towards if, in fact, the press wasn't such an easy thing to beat up on and such an easy wedge group.
I would like to add, though, that if the press isn't there to report on it, his base is not going to hear about it. And I'm not suggesting that they boycott it completely, but I'm saying that they should take control back of when they appear and how that conduct and behavior is going to be acceptable.
C-SPAN.
Oh,
we
yeah.
watch it on C-SPan.
All right,
no
well,
commercials,
C-SPAN's going, yeah.
no interruptions.
Okay, ladies, okay. Well, we have to take a quick break. We'll have our final thoughts when we return. Welcome back. Our guests join us for final thoughts. Now, President Trump continues to dismiss the Russia probe, the president calling it a hoax still. Now, this all comes hours after the director of national intelligence and other security officials issued a warning saying it was a threat to our democracy. Now, ladies, I want to ask you first, it's almost, some would say, it seems like they're working out of two different White Houses. And why do you think the president is saying there was no Russian meddling? Do either of you want to weigh in on this?
Well, I think that the Mueller probe has served a purpose in that it is exposing the lobbying movement in Washington. And some cases have been referred, both Democrat persons and Republican persons, to the New York District Attorney for having unregistered lobbying for foreign countries. And also, Manafort's tax problems all of those things predated his affiliation with the Trump campaign. So the Mueller probe is serving the purpose of lifting the curtain of lobbying and the money involved in lobbying and people that lobby without being registered and make quite a bit of money. So I think that's separate. And it's also pointed out that the Russians did interfere, you know, and did spy on us. Now, our hands aren't clean. We do the same thing.
Okay, well, let's get Susan to respond because we do only have a few more minutes left. We could go on for hours about this, I'm sure.
I want to just add that his choices of words are just playing the media itself. I don't think anybody really believes that there is no meddling. There's enough indictments out there, there's enough evidence out there that nobody's disputing Russian involvement in our election. And I agree with you about Paul Manafort, with the exception of the deadline of when he stopped being that way and when he went on to the Trump campaign. But the point is, there's enough facts out there that we're not even arguing it. The focus is how much did Trump know at the time. And you know what, the investigation's not over and it's uncovered a lot. So I think we should give it time to finish.
Okay, and let's check in with Dan. Dan, can you weigh in on this as well and maybe talk to us a little bit about concerns for Russian meddling in the 2018 and 2020 election?
Well, is it meddling? Is it collusion? Is it conspiracy? I mean, these are all strict legal definitions that they keep throwing out there, and it almost seems like they're just trying to splice some hairs. But the fact of the matter is I hear a lot about Russia, what they may or may not have done. Clearly, they meddled to some regard, but I don't hear any solutions to prevent them from meddling in the midterms. I've not heard any solutions about the preventing meddling in the midterms. In fact, Facebook has already announced that they have removed over 32 accounts of bad actors, they called it, that are meddling in the election. So while we're all squabbling and talking about something that's going to be decided by a Mueller investigation anyways, no one's minding the ship. No one's making sure that we are protected, and no one's making sure this election, this midterm, does not, in fact, get impeded on. And that's, frankly, horrible.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dan. And thank you to Mary Ellen Kirkwood of the Sarasota Republican Party, Susan Nylon of the Nylon Report, and joining us from Skype, of course, from Tampa is Dan Maduri of News Talk Florida for joining us tonight.